In Iran, the protest is not against hijab. It's not anti-hijab, by the way. Oftentimes it's seen as anti-hijab. It's not anti-hijab. It's anti-mandatory hijab,
Yes,
where they
exactly.
do not,
It's about
they want to
choice.
have, yeah, they want to have a personal choice. So it's not like
Yes.
Iranian women just do not want to wear hijab, but they do not want the state to tell them.
Dr. Saraswat, thank you so much for taking out the time to speak to Global Compass and Strat News Global.
Thank you. Good to be here once again.
So, ever since the new president of Iran was elected, not just the Iranian society, but the entire international community has been intrigued because he has positioned himself as a reformist. So today, in this conversation, we're going to focus on, what exactly does he mean, or do the people who elected him, what were they thinking, or what were they expecting as a reformer, and is reform really possible in an orthodox society like Iran, and to what extent? So, that's broadly going to be the focus of this interview. But first of all, um, what do you think will be the future direction now of Iran's politics with the election of Pezeshkian?
Okay, thanks for asking this very layered question in the beginning itself. So let me start by saying that this snap presidential election and the approval of a reformist candidate by the Guardian Council, the fact that in 2021 election there was no prominent reformist face, and the reformists, as a political faction, they had not really very actively participated in the election. So in this snap election, when reformists, a five-time parliamentarian like Masood Pezeshkian, he is given the go ahead to run. So we see the moderates and the reformists galvanized, they mobilized around him. And the idea, of course, for the establishment was that by bringing reformists back into the race in the political arena, they'll be able to garner, they'll be able to attract the gray voters, the people who usually don't come out to vote, and they are likely to come out to vote when there is a reformist in the fray. So the interesting bit is that in the first round, where the turnout was 40%. So clearly, there was not much of a change in terms of the gray voters really coming out to vote. But in the second round, and I think that's really interesting, where the turnout increased by 10%, and the people came out to vote, a certain section which had not voted in the previous round. Basically, it is being widely seen as a no to the kind of more radical position or radical continuation that the hardliner candidate Saeed Jalili was offering. So yes, it is, if you the majority of analysts, Iranian analysts, are looking at it as a no vote to radicalism. Now, the other question, whether reform is possible, how reformists are really different. Well, they are. And, we've seen that the reformists and the moderates, they try to, because they do come to power largely riding a popular support, higher turnout. I mean, when there is lesser turnout, it's conservatives who win. But reformists, since they come on a popular vote, they use that mandate to sort of press people's demand, their middle class constituencies demand, and they kind of act as an opposition within the establishment, where they're trying to negotiate between the more the theocratic, the parallel institutions, and the people who have voted them to power. So yes, president has to function within the parameters set by the parallel state, especially the supreme leader. But he he, as the executive in chief, he is the one. His cabinet formulates the policy and then gets them approved. In Parliament, when in terms of legislation, uh, or or in the Supreme National Security Council, when speaking of national security and foreign policies. So I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle in terms of the authority and the influence that a president, a reformist president, can have on more polarized issues like hijab or women's rights. I think they do have a room to maneuver and to sort of press for some kind of meaningful change.
Right. No, yeah, exactly. That the reason I asked this question was, this whole dichotomy, if you were to call it that, or, the whole paradox that on one hand, you have the supreme leader's overarching influence on morality issues and issues of governance. And on the other, this man, the new president, Masood Pezeshkian, who, in fact, during the Islamic Revolution, insisted and ensured that the hijab is worn by women patients as well as doctors and nurses in hospitals. He has talked about easing the enforcement of the mandatory headscarf. So, what can people really expect? Because I think a lot of people are a bit confused as to what exactly is this man wanting to do. And also, he has also talked of reaching out to the West. Whereas, as you said, his rival, that is Jalili, he said he is going to take a very hardline stance on both morality issues as well as an uncompromising stance when it comes to talks with the West. So that was the reason I asked you this, because they seem to be like two different things altogether, and the truth lies in between. But what can the people of Iran expect now?
The what you said about Pezeshkian enforcing hijab back in the day, in the heydays of revolution, and then hence what can be expected. I think that's kind of symptomatic of how the reformists as a faction, as a political movement, has developed in Iran. I mean, of course, these were all revolutionaries. Khomeini, he called chadar as the flag of the revolution, because mind you, in the Islamic Revolution, women were at the forefront. I mean, Iranian society, it's not comparable to other countries in the neighborhood. Women have been in political activism, and they've had access to education, and so it's a different culture in that sense. But let me just stick to the reformists, how their position, or how their views on these issues have changed. So in the Islamic Revolution, women were there, and that time they also, because Raza Shah, the Pahlavi monarch, had enforced unveiling of women. Just like how it happened in Turkey. Forced unveiling. You have to look modern, and it was a top-down westernization. And so somewhere, in the beginning of the revolution, in the revolutionary, the movement, women, there were a lot of women who saw chadar, hijab, as a political statement. As symbols, they changed their meaning. So I think in the early days, yes, there were those zealous revolutionaries who were probably enforcing them. But as the society has changed, the opening of the 1990s, there was, after the Iran-Iraq war, 8 years war, there was an opening in terms of, Iran sort of seeking investment and opening its economy, and also information society emerging, internet and satellite TV. So the Iranian society also underwent like a fast change, and the new generation, especially that is born in the 2000s, they're in a completely different world. So as the society has changed, the reformists, they emerged, of course, from from the ranks of the revolutionaries, also from the leftists, side of the revolutionary spectrum. But they are the ones who started sort of talking about a more humane and less rigid kind of interpretation of what it means to be revolutionary. What does Islam what how Islamic society should be organized. So they have brought in more liberal elements, and that was obviously reflecting the changes in the Iranian society itself. So to say, what Masood Pezeshkian talked in his days as a young revolutionary, and how the reformist movement has come to evolve, cultivating a middle class constituency, and talking about reforming the Islamic ideology and the governance as more liberal lines, if not secular, and they are being criticized as secular by their conservative hardliner rivals. So I think this reformist movement for the last 20 years, they've been they were hoping for incremental change, where they it was like development of civil society, cultural opening, and more freedoms, personal freedoms. And that kind of alternative, I think, makes a lot of sense right now, given the Masamini protests, who were very was a huge challenge to the system. So I think the reformists can and step in and sort of provide some kind of reconciliation between the system and the people. So I think that is the hope. And Pezeshkian, I think, has done a very excellent job, especially if you see the kind of how he involved his daughter. He's a single father, and his daughter was very much there by his side, during the campaign. And the statement that he made during the 2022 protest movement about the earth should swallow open up and swallow me, and we should be ashamed about this. So this statement was circulating a lot. So he's presented a more people centric, more human approach to these issues, rather than very securitized top down enforcement, or even criminalizing of hijab law, of the bad hijab. So I think
I apologize for the cynicism here, but I mean, it was wonderful what you talked about, and it makes a lot of sense that over the decades, of course, things have changed, things have evolved. So has he. But we are talking about a country where, as you said, 80 to 85% of women are literate, are educated, but in the workforce, there's only about 13 to 14% of women. We are talking about a society where in 2022, Mahsa Amini was arrested for not wanting to wear the hijab, and she died under mysterious circumstances. We are talking about a country where a lawyer, his name is Mohsen Burhani, he had spoken out against the manner in which the 2022 protests were handled, and he was arrested a day after Pezeshkian came to power. So that is the reason for my cynicism and my asking you, has anything actually changed for women, or will anything change for women? Of course, you talked about his daughter, but on the ground, in reality, for the common women, do you think anything will change at all?
Okay, let me, in all fairness, Iran is a very interesting case, in the sense it's the Western media tends to have a very securitized view of it, as if Iran is the only country, but it's a society in transition, and the challenges that are happening there. Uh, of course, even the establishment takes a very securitized view of things, given the hostility it has faced from the West, and how these issues are amplified a lot. I mean, and they are used to weaponize. I mean, they are weaponized by the Western, actors, to sort of portray Iran as a particularly, uh, you know, particularly anti-women or something like that. I think we need
Yes,
to have a nuanced view of that. Like, just let me just say that Iranian women, they do not need, Western support, and the Western, because that Western support is also very vested in nature. They are driven by their,
of course.
rather cynical calculation. But the Iranian women's movement, I think there is it's been there since the early 2000s. So what I'm saying is that in Iran, the women have been part of the, uh, the social political milieu. They've been there. They've been present as actors. So of course, their aspirations, they feel suffocated in the current system, but they are relentless, and that's why we see that the reformists will try and sort of co-opt them to some certain extent. But I think there is also a sense at this, among the women movement in Iran, that reformists have also proved ineffective. I mean Khatami's presidency in the early 2000s, it raised expectations, ballooned expectations, and there were certain changes, like chador, which used to be like heavily, was like a fixture of siyasar. They are called black, they all the black heads. So they that was relaxed, and then their expectations have just increased, and that's rightly so. And so what I'm saying is that Iranian women, they should be seen as actors, and they are pressing on their demands. So now it's the system has to acknowledge them, and the reformists, in my opinion, they are better placed to sort of act as a kind of a bridge between the two extremes. Women who do see, again, in Iran, the protest is not against hijab, it's not anti-hijab, by the way. Oftentimes it's seen as anti-hijab. It's not anti-hijab, it's anti-mandatory hijab,
Yes,
where they
exactly.
do not,
It's about
they want
choice.
to have, yeah, they want to have a personal choice. So it's not like
Yes.
Iranian women just do not want to wear hijab, but they do not want the state to tell them. So I think the reformists, I will not write them off. They would try to have a more public debate on the issue of legislation, like hijab law, which the predecessors, conservative hardliners, they were probably just using their majority in the parliament to push it through. But here, I think there is an opportunity to have a more public debate, a more wider sort of uh, discussion about these issues.
My last question to you: do you see any increase in the political participation of women in the new regime?
Yeah, think it's quite. I mean, Iran is like many other Asian countries, where it's men who dominate the high positions, in any branch of the government, and Iran is no exceptions. But this particular election, there was a woman candidate. I'm forgetting her name, but she was picked up by Pezeshkian as one of the advisors. And I have heard that there may be a woman vice president. There have been, if I recall, Iran has several vice presidents, and earlier I think there have been women who've been in vice presidential position. So maybe, I mean, after the protest movement of the 2022, I think this question of women has become front and center. It has come front and center. So the establishment may want to take off some relieve some pressure by showing, by making these kind of decision, putting women in very visible positions. So it may happen. And there seems to be some indications of that.
Hmm. So the situation is not black and white, as you put it so succinctly and so nicely. The whole idea of things of society, of how women themselves want to be. It is definitely complicated. It's all kinds of shades of gray, and which is why this interview itself has been so nuanced and so many different things coming and kind of merging into each other. But thank you so much, Dr. Saraswat, for giving us that perspective. And I think one will have to wait and watch very closely over the next few years for any changes, visible changes, as far as women's role, women's position in Iranian society occurs. But thank you so much for taking out the time to speak to us.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine. Thank
Hope
you.
you enjoyed this interview. Thank you.
Thank you.